The desert wind howled across the surface of Carvenis, carrying red dust over the ancient structure that had appeared 3 days ago. The Temple of Ascension stood like a mountain made of black glass, its surface reflecting the twin suns in ways that hurt the eyes. It was older than any civilization in the galaxy, built by the precursors before they vanished into history. Every 1,000 years it appeared on a different world, and every time it did, warriors came. This time 1,000 warriors had gathered. They came from every corner of known space. The Krillians brought 300 of their finest soldiers, each one standing 8 feet tall with natural armor plating that could stop plasma fire. The Korthans sent their battle champions, creatures with 4 arms and reflexes fast enough to snatch bullets from the air. The Valdrine mystics floated above the ground, their minds so powerful they could crush metal with thought alone. There were species that breathed methane, species that saw in 12 different light spectrums, and species that had been conquering worlds when Earth was still covered in ice. And then there was Corporal Deho. He stood near the back of the massive crowd, checking his equipment one more time. Standard issue body armor, a little scratched, a plasma rifle he'd carried for 3 years, reliable but outdated, boots that had walked across 17 different worlds, all of them hostile in one way or another. He was 5'9", weighed 170 pounds, and had brown eyes that had seen too many friends die in stupid accidents on colony worlds that didn't quite have breathable air. "You really going through with this?" Captain Heejin asked, walking up beside him. She was his commanding officer, and she'd tried to talk him out of volunteering. "Already signed the forms," Deho said. "You know what the odds are? Look around. Look at these species. The Krillians have bones like steel. The Valdrine can read minds. What do we have?" Deho shrugged. "Stubbornness?" Heejin didn't laugh. 999 of the greatest warriors in the galaxy are here. "You're a decent soldier, Deho, but you're not special. You're just going to get hurt." "Maybe," Deho admitted. He looked at the temple, at the way it seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. "But someone from Earth should try. If we don't, everyone will keep thinking we're the weak species that got lucky finding faster than light travel." That was the truth of it. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Council 40 years ago, and most species still saw them as children playing at being adults. Weak gravity worlders, no natural weapons, no psychic abilities, short lifespans, fragile bodies that broke if you looked at them wrong. The only reason they'd been accepted at all was because they'd figured out a new kind of engine, and the Council wanted the technology. 5 minutes, someone shouted in a language that the translation device in Deho's ear turned into Korean. "All warriors to the entrance." The crowd began to move. Deho moved with them, feeling very small among these giants. A Krillian warrior bumped into him without noticing, nearly knocking him over. A floating Valdrine passed overhead, and Deho felt a pressure against his mind like someone knocking on a door. He pushed back instinctively, and the pressure vanished. The Valdrine looked down at him with 3 eyes that showed something like surprise. The temple's entrance was a simple arch, 50 feet tall and carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. They seemed to shift and change, never quite the same twice. Scientists had been studying those symbols for 3 days, and still couldn't agree on what they meant. Some said they were mathematical formulas. Others claimed they were historical records. A few insisted they were warnings. Commander Velthra of the Krillian Empire stood at the front of the crowd. She was the largest warrior present, nearly 9 feet tall, her exoskeleton decorated with marks of honor from 100 battles. When she spoke, her voice boomed across the desert. "Warriors of the galaxy, the Temple of Ascension has stood as a challenge for millions of years. Legends say that whoever completes its trials will gain power beyond imagination, the strength to reshape worlds, the knowledge to unlock the secrets of the precursors. Today we prove ourselves worthy." The crowd roared. Species that couldn't normally make sound clicked mandibles or flashed light patterns. The translation devices struggled to keep up with 1,000 voices crying out in triumph. Deho stayed quiet. He'd read the historical records. In the past 5,000 years, the temple had appeared 7 times. Thousands of warriors had entered. None had ever emerged. The temple would accept them, test them, and then vanish again, taking everyone inside with it. Scientists didn't know if the warriors died or were transported somewhere else. "The temple never left bodies behind. Enter!" Velthra commanded, and the warriors surged forward. The inside of the temple was vast. The entrance hall could have held 10 starships, and the ceiling was so high that the top disappeared into darkness. The walls were the same black glass as the outside, perfectly smooth without seams or joints. The floor looked like polished stone, but it was warm under Deho's boots, almost like it was alive, and in the center of the hall, there was a single step. It was just 6 inches high, made of pale stone that seemed to glow faintly. It sat alone in the middle of the enormous room, looking completely out of place. No other features, no doors, no passages, just a step. The warriors spread out, filling the hall. Deho ended up near the middle of the crowd, trying to see over and between the larger species. Everyone was looking at the step, confused. This was the legendary temple? This was the trial that had defeated thousands? Is this a joke? Battlemaster Thek said. He was a Korthan, with 4 arms thick with muscle and a reputation for never losing a fight.
We came all this way for stairs?
Commander Velthra approached the step carefully. She was a warrior, trained to spot traps. She circled it twice, examining it from every angle. Finally, she placed one armored foot on the step. She collapsed instantly, falling like someone had cut her strings. Her body hit the floor with a crash that echoed through the hall. "Commander!" The Krillian warriors rushed forward, but when they tried to lift her, she didn't respond. Her eyes were open but empty, staring at nothing. Medical scanners showed her vital signs were stable, but her mind was gone. Not dead, just absent. A psychic attack, a Valdrine mystic said. The step must be trapped. Battlemaster Thex laughed. Psychic tricks don't work on Korthans. Our minds are shielded. He stepped up to the step and placed both feet on it firmly. He fell even faster than Velthra had. Then the panic started. Warriors rushed forward, determined to prove their strength. A Valdrine mystic tried to use telekinesis to understand the step before touching it. The moment his power made contact, he screamed and collapsed. A Metherian warrior in a containment suit stepped on the step. The suit clattered to the floor, empty. The warrior inside reduced to unconscious gas. A cybernetic warrior from the machine worlds, more computer than organic, touched the step and immediately shut down. One by one, they fell. The greatest warriors in the galaxy. Each one special in their own way, each one better than Deho in every measurable category. Stronger, faster, smarter, more experienced. It didn't matter. The step rejected them all. Deho watched as the number of standing warriors dropped. 900. 800. 500. The medical teams were overwhelmed, dragging unconscious bodies to the sides of the hall. Some species tried to study the problem scientifically. Others attacked the step with weapons, but every beam of energy and every bullet stopped inches from the stone, absorbed by nothing. A few warriors simply left, refusing to try. Better to live as a coward than die as a fool. 300 warriors left. 200. 100. Captain Hygen grabbed Deho's arm. Don't, she said quietly. Please don't. I have to try, Deho said. Why? You've seen what it does. No one can pass. There's no shame in walking away. Deho looked at the step, at the pile of unconscious warriors surrounding it. Because if I don't try, I'll always wonder if I could have. The number kept dropping. 50 warriors, 20, 10. Each one fell the same way, instant and absolute. Whatever the step was testing for, none of them had it. Finally, only Deho remained standing. One human in a hall meant for thousands, surrounded by the greatest warriors the galaxy had ever produced, all of them defeated by 6 inches of stone. The cameras were on him now. Millions of people across the galaxy were watching, waiting to see the human fail like everyone else. He could hear the whispers of the medical teams. See Captain Hyejan's face tight with worry. Deho walked forward. His boots echoed on the stone floor, impossibly loud in the sudden silence. He stopped in front of the step and looked down at it. Just a step. Nothing special about it, at least nothing he could see. But it had defeated beings that could crush him with their thoughts. Warriors that had conquered planets. Champions that had never known defeat. He thought about Earth. About his parents working on a mining station above a dead world. About his sister who died when her shuttle lost pressure. About every human colony scratching out survival on planets that should have killed them. About how humanity had climbed up from caves to stars without claws or armor or psychic powers. Just stubborn refusal to quit. Deho placed his foot on the step. The world exploded into light and sensation. He felt something vast and ancient pressing against his mind, examining him, measuring him against some standard he couldn't understand. It felt like drowning and flying at the same time. Like every moment of his life was being weighed. It should have hurt. It should have destroyed him like it had destroyed everyone else. But it didn't. Daiho stood on the step, his foot planted firmly on the stone, and he remained conscious. The light faded. The pressure eased. He took a breath and realized he was still breathing. The temple awakened. The walls began to glow with lines of light, creating patterns that spread across every surface. The ceiling lit up, revealing that it wasn't darkness above but rather a view of space, of stars and galaxies spinning in accelerated time. And a voice spoke, not through sound but directly into his mind in every language at once. The first trial is acknowledged. The human may proceed. Behind Daiho, massive doors carved themselves into the walls, opening to reveal a corridor beyond. Ahead of him, the rest of the temple waited, full of challenges he couldn't imagine. And back on the floor, Captain Hyejin stared at him with her mouth open, while across the galaxy, millions of beings tried to understand how the weakest species had done what no one else could. Daiho looked back at Hyejin one more time, gave her a small nod, and walked forward into the temple. The doors closed behind him with a sound like thunder, and he was alone. The doors sealed behind Daiho with a final click that seemed to echo forever. He was alone in a corridor that stretched ahead into darkness, lit only by the faint glow from the walls. The black glass surface pulsed with light like a heartbeat, and he realized the temple was alive in some way he didn't understand. Outside, chaos had erupted. Captain Hyejin was screaming into her communicator, demanding explanations that no one could give. The medical teams were still working on the unconscious warriors, but none of them were waking up. Commander Velthra, Battlemaster Thex, the Valdrine Mystics, all the greatest warriors in the galaxy lay in rows like broken toys, their minds simply gone. And the human had walked forward. The galactic news networks exploded with the footage. Every station showed the same image on repeat. Daiho, unremarkable in his standard armor, placing his foot on the step and remaining standing. The analysts talked over each other, trying to explain the impossible. The humans were weak. Everyone knew this. Their homeworld had low gravity. They had no natural weapons. Their psych profiles showed emotional instability. They were new to space, barely children compared to species that had been traveling between stars for millions of years. So how had one of them succeeded where everyone else failed? Daiho didn't know. He was too busy trying not to die. The corridor ahead looked simple enough. Just a straight path, maybe 50 feet long, leading to another door. The floor was the same polished stone as the entrance hall. The walls glowed softly. Nothing seemed dangerous. He took a step forward and his knees nearly buckled. Gravity had increased. Not by much, maybe 1.5 times Earth normal, but enough that he noticed. His armor felt heavier, his rifle pulled down on his shoulder. He adjusted his stance and took another step. The gravity increased again. By his fifth step, it felt like he was walking on a planet twice the size of Earth. His muscles were straining. Each breath took effort. He'd trained in high-gravity environments before, all soldiers did. But this was different. The gravity wasn't constant. It kept increasing with every step. 10 steps in, and he was at 3 times Earth gravity. He had to lean forward to keep walking, and his boots made deep sounds against the floor. His armor felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The rifle on his back was an anchor trying to drag him down. 20 steps in at 5 times Earth gravity, Daiho fell to one knee. His vision went dark at the edges. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Every muscle in his body screamed. This was beyond any training he'd done. This was beyond what a human body should be able to survive. He thought about giving up. The temple had said he could proceed, but it hadn't said he had to. He could turn around, go back through the door, and leave with his life. No one would blame him. He'd already done more than anyone expected. But when he looked back, the door was gone. The corridor behind him was just a solid wall now, glowing with that same soft light. The only way out was forward. Daiho laughed, a short, bitter sound that took too much air. Of course. The temple wasn't going to make it easy. He started crawling. Outside the temple, Dr. Mina was watching the scanners. She was a Valdrine, one of the best psychologists in the galaxy, and she'd been studying the unconscious warriors since they fell. She'd just made a breakthrough, and it terrified her. The step didn't test physical strength, she announced to the emergency council that had formed. Representatives from every major species were there, trying to understand what had happened. Obviously, a Corthan general said, Battlemaster Thex could lift a ground transport. He failed. And it didn't test psychic ability, Mina continued. Our most powerful mystics couldn't even touch it. Then what did it test? Captain Heejin demanded. She'd been arguing with the council for an hour, demanding they find a way to help Daiho. But the temple didn't respond to anything. Weapons, tools, communication, nothing could penetrate its walls. Mina pulled up brain scans of the fallen warriors. I've been comparing their neural patterns at the moment of contact. Every single one of them shows the same thing. Their minds were overloaded by a massive influx of experience, of memory, of accumulated trauma. The step didn't knock them out. It downloaded something into them and their minds couldn't handle it. Downloaded what? Hyejin asked. Suffering, Mina said quietly. The weight of survival. Every species here evolved in relatively stable environments. The Krillians had abundant resources and few predators. The Korthans developed on a paradise world with perfect weather. The Valdrine ascended to psychic ability because they never needed to fight for food. We're all successful species because our evolution was easy. And humans? A Krillian officer asked. Mina pulled up Earth's geological record. Ice ages. Volcanic winters. Asteroid impacts. Mass extinctions. Humans evolved in hell. Their planet tried to kill them every 10,000 years, and they survived anyway. Their minds are built to carry that weight because they had to be. The council chamber went silent. Everyone was watching the screens now, watching Daiho crawl through impossible gravity, centimeter by centimeter, refusing to stop. At 30 steps, the gravity was at 10 times Earth normal. Daiho's armor had cracked under the pressure. He'd abandoned his rifle steps ago because he couldn't carry it anymore. His fingers were broken, he was pretty sure, but the pain was distant now, buried under the simple need to keep moving. Blood ran from his nose, floating in thick drops that fell slowly in the heavy gravity. He thought about his sister. Her name had been Unji, and she'd wanted to be a pilot. She'd made it through training, got assigned to a colony shuttle, and died when a seal failed during a routine flight. 43 people dead because of a part that cost 3 credits and someone had decided to save money. The funeral had been in vacuum because the colony couldn't spare the air for a proper ceremony. He thought about his parents. They'd worked in the lithium mines on Titan Station, breathing recycled air that always smelled like metal, eating food grown in vats that never quite tasted right. They'd saved for 15 years to send him to school. He'd joined the military instead because it was free, and sent his salary home. They'd never complained. They'd just kept working, kept surviving because that's what humans did. He thought about Earth, about a species that had crawled out of caves with nothing but sharp rocks and attitude. No claws, no venom, no armor. Just the ability to walk a little farther than the thing chasing them. To try one more time when logic said to quit. To look at a universe that didn't want them and say, too bad, we're here anyway. At 40 steps, Daiho couldn't crawl anymore. The gravity was too strong. His body was pressed flat against the floor and he couldn't lift his head. He could barely breathe. His ribs were cracking under his own weight, so he started pulling himself forward with his fingers, dragging his body inches at a time. The galaxy watched in silence. On 100 worlds, in 1,000 ships, millions of beings saw a human refuse to quit. They saw him bleeding, broken, crushed under gravity that should have killed him and still moving forward. The analysts had stopped talking. There was nothing to say. Captain Hyejin was crying, though she'd deny it later. "Get up," she whispered to the screen. "Daiho, please just get up and walk back." But the door behind him was still gone. The only way out was forward. At 50 steps, at 20 times Earth gravity, Daiho stopped. He couldn't move anymore. His body simply wouldn't respond. Every bone should be powder. Every muscle should be torn. By all rights, he should be dead, but he wasn't dead. He was just stuck. He lay there on the floor, pressed flat, unable to move, and he thought about all the humans who'd come before him, the ones who'd starved through winters, the ones who'd walked across continents with nothing but hope, the ones who'd built cities in deserts and farms in frozen wasteland, the ones who'd looked at the stars and said, "We're going there," even though everyone with sense knew it was impossible. Humans were good at impossible things. Daiho moved his finger. Just one finger dragging across the stone, pulling his body forward a centimeter. Then another finger. Another centimeter. The distance to the door was impossible. He couldn't see it anymore. Couldn't see anything except the stone in front of his face. But it was there somewhere ahead and he would reach it. Even if it took forever. Even if it killed him, he would reach it. 1 centimeter at a time, Daiho crawled through gravity that should have destroyed him. Blood ran from his mouth now, and he knew something inside was broken. Didn't matter. He'd been broken before. Humans were good at working broken, and then suddenly the pressure eased. The gravity was still there, still crushing, but it wasn't getting worse. Tejo managed to lift his head and saw the door 5 feet ahead. 5 feet. He'd walked 5 feet a million times in his life without thinking about it. Now it looked like a mountain. He crawled. Finger by finger, inch by inch, he crawled. His vision was gone except for a small tunnel straight ahead. His hearing was just his own heartbeat. His whole world was the stone floor and the door and the need to reach it. When his hand touched the door, it swung open and gravity returned to normal. Tejo lay in the doorway, gasping, unable to move even though the crushing weight was gone. Every part of him hurt. Every cell in his body was screaming. He should rest. He should sleep. He should quit. Instead, he stood up. It took 5 minutes and he had to use the wall for support, but he stood up. His legs shook. His vision swam. Blood dripped from his face onto the floor. But he was standing. The third chamber lay ahead, and he could see 1,000 doorways set into the far wall. Above each door was a symbol, and as he watched, the symbols began to change, cycling through different shapes and colors faster than he could follow. Tejo laughed. It hurt to laugh, but he did it anyway. Of course, he said to the empty room. Because walking through hell wasn't enough. Now I've got to solve a puzzle. He limped forward into the chamber, leaving a trail of blood behind him. Outside the temple, the galaxy watched and wondered how he was still alive. Inside the temple, Tejo wondered the same thing. But he was alive, and the doors were ahead, and he'd come too far to stop now. Somewhere in the back of his mind, buried under pain and exhaustion, was a simple thought that had kept humanity alive for 1,000,000 years. One more step. Just one more step. You can always take one more step. Tejo stood in front of 1,000 doors, watching symbols cycle above each one at dizzying speed. Mathematical equations, star charts, what looked like historical records in languages long dead, patterns that might be music or might be architectural plans, chemical formulas, biological diagrams. Some symbols hurt to look at directly, existing in colors his eyes shouldn't be able to see. He tried to access the temple's communication system to call for help, but the temple had sealed him off completely. No signals in or out. He was alone with a puzzle that would take lifetimes to solve. Outside, the greatest minds in the galaxy had assembled. The computational nexus had brought their master AI, an intelligence that could process 1 billion calculations per second. The Valdrine Psionic Council had gathered their strongest telepaths. The academic consortium had representatives from 300 universities. They all watched through the cameras that somehow still worked, trying to help a human they couldn't talk to. Pattern analysis complete, the Nexus AI announced. The symbols above each door represent different branches of knowledge. Mathematics, history, science, art, warfare, philosophy. Each door tests a different subject. So he just needs to pick the right subject? A Corthan professor asked. No, a Valdrine elder said. Her 3 eyes focused on the screens. Look closer. The symbols aren't just cycling randomly. They're telling a story. The door he needs to choose relates to all the symbols together, not just one. Captain Heejin was watching Tejo carefully. He was hurt badly. Even through the camera, she could see the way he favored his left side, the blood still dripping from his nose, the way his hands shook. He needed medical attention immediately, but there was no way to reach him. Can't we force the temple open? She demanded. We've tried everything, a Krillian engineer reported. The walls don't respond to any tool we have. It's like trying to cut through the fabric of space itself. Inside the temple, Tejo was thinking. He'd been staring at the doors for 10 minutes now, watching the symbols change. Some patterns he recognized. He'd studied enough to get his basic education certifications. Math, science, basic history. But most of the symbols were completely foreign. Languages he'd never seen. Concepts that existed beyond his understanding. How was he supposed to choose when he didn't even understand the question? The galaxy's experts were having the same problem. The mathematical door shows equations from 15 different civilizations, the Nexus AI reported. To verify which is correct would require solving each equation, then comparing the results to find the underlying pattern. Estimated time, 4 months. The historical door references events from the precursor era, a historian said. We barely understand that period. We'd need to verify each reference against archaeological records. That's years of work. The scientific door cycles through theories we haven't even discovered yet, a physicist added. I'm seeing what might be unified field theory. Quantum consciousness models, things we've only dreamed about. How can he choose when the answer is beyond our current knowledge? They were trying to solve the puzzle the way their species always did. Carefully, methodically, gathering all the information, verifying every detail, making absolutely certain before acting. It was the smart way, the logical way, the way that successful species approached problems. But Deho wasn't from a successful species. He was from a species that had survived. He spent 20 minutes examining the doors. He noted that door 247 had symbols that seemed to repeat more often than others. He noticed that door 163 showed a pattern similar to human DNA. He saw that door 891 had mathematical equations he actually recognized from basic engineering classes. But he also saw hundreds of doors he didn't understand at all, showing knowledge so far beyond him that he couldn't even identify what subject they represented. Then he made a choice based on incomplete information and walked. Through door 247, the galaxy's experts were still debating the problem when they saw him move. No, the Nexus AI said. He can't choose yet. We haven't finished the analysis. He needs more data, a professor shouted. We're only 3% through the door meanings. He's going to choose wrong, another expert said. The probability of random success is 0.1%. He'll fail. But the door opened when Deho touched it and he walked through. The passage beyond was short, just 10 feet, and it opened into another chamber. This one was empty except for text on the far wall. It said in every language including Korean, "Correct, proceed." The experts fell silent. Captain Hyejin felt something loosen in her chest. Dr. Mina stared at the screen with wide eyes. How? The Korthan professor asked. He couldn't have known. There wasn't enough information to be certain. That's exactly right, Mina said slowly. He wasn't certain. He couldn't be. But he chose anyway. That's illogical, the Nexus AI said. Acting without sufficient data leads to failure. For you, Mina replied. But humans are different. Let me show you something. She pulled up human psychological studies. Most species in the galaxy evolved in stable environments. When you face a problem, your instinct is to gather all available information before acting. This makes sense. In a predictable environment, careful planning leads to success. But humans evolved in chaos. Earth's climate swung wildly. Food supplies were unpredictable. Predators were everywhere. Humans who waited for certainty died. Humans who made good enough decisions with incomplete information survived. You're saying humans are comfortable with uncertainty? Avaldrine asked. I'm saying they're built for it, Mina said. Watch. On screen, Deho had entered another chamber. This one had 100 doors, each one marked with a simple question in his language. He spent 5 minutes reading them, then walked through one. Correct again. The next chamber had 50 doors with complex riddles. He read them for 3 minutes, chose one. Correct. Another chamber, 20 doors, each one requiring understanding of physics he'd never studied. He made an educated guess. Correct. The pattern became clear. The temple wasn't testing knowledge. It was testing the ability to make decisions without complete information and keep moving forward. This is insane, the Korthan general said. He's just guessing. He's not guessing, Hyejin said quietly. She knew Deho had served with him for 3 years. He's using everything he knows, making the best choice he can, and accepting that he might be wrong. That's different than guessing. The result is the same if he's wrong, the general pointed out. But he's not wrong, Mina said. That's what the temple is selecting for. The ability to act without certainty. Every successful species here became successful because we learned to plan carefully, to think before acting, to gather data before deciding. But the precursors were beyond successful. They built structures that last millions of years. They had technology we can't even imagine. Maybe they learned that too much caution is its own kind of failure. Inside the temple, Deho was getting tired. The chambers kept coming, each one presenting a new puzzle. He was working on instinct now, on pattern recognition built from a lifetime of making do with less information than he needed. Choose a door, walk through, see if it opens. If it does, you were right enough. If it doesn't, you were wrong and probably dead. Simple, except it wasn't simple. His head hurt from trying to parse symbols he didn't understand. His body hurt from the gravity chamber. He was running on empty and he knew it. But he kept moving because stopping meant thinking about how impossible this all was, and thinking about it would make him freeze up. Better to just keep walking. The chambers grew more complex. Instead of symbols, some doors showed scenarios. Choose how to respond to a first contact situation with no information about the alien species. Choose how to handle a ship malfunction with incomplete diagnostic data. Choose how to split limited resources between competing needs. Every problem was designed to have no clear correct answer, just choices that might work or might not. Deho chose. Over and over he chose. He was wrong sometimes, he knew that, but the temple seemed to accept good enough as an answer. The doors that were wrong simply wouldn't open, and he'd try another one. No punishment, no penalty except lost time. Just try again. After what felt like hours but might have been days, he entered a chamber different from the others. It was large, nearly as big as the entrance hall, and filled with holographic warriors. Each one represented a different species. They stood motionless, waiting. Text appeared in the air. Defeat them all. Deho looked at the warriors. He recognized some of the species. Krillian, Korthan, Valdrine, dozens of others. Each one was probably a perfect representation of that species at their peak. The best fighters their evolution had produced. Great, he said to the empty room. Because this day wasn't hard enough already. The holograms activated simultaneously and attacked. Deho had fought aliens before in training exercises. He knew the theory. Krillians were strong but slow. Korthans were fast but telegraphed their moves with all four arms. Valdrine relied on psychic abilities that didn't work well on humans. Each species had strengths and weaknesses. But theory meant nothing when a holographic Krillian's fist caught him in the chest and sent him flying across the room. He hit the wall hard enough to crack his already damaged ribs. His vision went white with pain. Through the haze, he saw the holographic warriors advancing. All of them, at once. This was going to hurt. Outside, the galaxy watched as Deho tried to fight and failed. He was outmatched in every way. The holograms were faster, stronger, more skilled. They didn't tire. They didn't hesitate. They were perfect. Deho lasted 30 seconds before the holographic Korthan pinned him to the floor with all four arms. The room reset. The warriors returned to their starting positions. He tried again. Lasted 40 seconds this time before a Valdrine hologram predicted his movements and 3 others struck him simultaneously. Reset. Try again. 1 minute, reset, 2 minutes, reset, 5 minutes, reset. He can't win, the Korthan general said. This is impossible. But Captain Hyejin was smiling now. He's not trying to win. Watch. Every time Deho failed, he learned something. The Korthan's lower left arm moved fractionally slower than the others. The Valdrine's psychic prediction didn't work when he acted on pure instinct instead of thought. The Krillian's armor had weak points at the joints. He was collecting data with his face, and he was starting to understand. On his 20th attempt, Deho didn't attack at all. He dodged, moved, led the holograms around the chamber. He got them fighting each other, using their strengths against them. When the Korthan struck at him, he rolled aside and the blow hit a Valdrine instead. When the Krillian charged, he moved behind a cluster of other warriors and the charge scattered them. He turned the fight into chaos, and in chaos, the perfect technique of the holograms became a weakness. 3 minutes in, half the holograms were destroyed by each other. 5 minutes and only 3 remained. Deho was bleeding from a dozen places, but he was still moving. The last hologram, a massive creature from a species he didn't recognize, cornered him against a wall. Deho grabbed a piece of debris from a broken hologram and jammed it into the chamber's wall panel. Sparks flew. The hologram flickered and died. Text appeared. Victory condition achieved. Adaptation recognized. Deho collapsed to his knees, gasping. That's cheating, he said to no one. The text changed. Survival has no rules. A door opened in the far wall. Deho stayed on his knees for a moment, catching his breath, checking his injuries. He was a mess, but he was alive. And the door was open. He stood up, using the wall for support, and limped toward the exit. Commander Velthra woke up screaming. The medical staff rushed to her side as she thrashed against the restraints, her mind finally returning after 3 days of emptiness. When she could focus, when the images stopped flooding her thoughts, the first thing she asked was, "The human. Where is he?" They showed her the screens. Deho was entering a new chamber, moving slowly, clearly injured. But moving, how? Velthra asked. How is he still going? No one had an answer. The greatest warriors in the galaxy lay in medical beds, their minds slowly recovering from whatever the temple had done to them, and a human who should have been the first to fall was deeper inside than anyone had ever gone. More warriors were waking up now. Battlemaster Thex, Mystic Yuri, champions from 100 worlds, all of them confused, all of them asking the same question. How was the human still alive? Captain Hyejin had stopped sleeping. She stood in the command center, watching the screens constantly, waiting for Daeho to fall. He had to fall eventually. No one could keep going like this. His body was broken. His equipment was destroyed. He'd been inside for 3 days with no food, no water, no rest. Every expert said he should be dead, but he kept walking. The 5th chamber was the largest yet. The ceiling stretched up into darkness and the walls were so far apart that Daeho couldn't see them clearly. The floor was smooth stone, and in the center of the vast space stood a simple chair. Next to it, a holographic interface floated in the air, pulsing with soft light. Daeho limped toward it. Each step hurt. He'd stopped thinking about the pain hours ago because thinking about it made it worse. His ribs were definitely broken. His left arm wasn't working right. Blood had dried on his face from a cut above his eye. His boots were falling apart. But he was moving, and that was enough. When he reached the chair, he sat down carefully. The interface brightened and text appeared in Korean. You have proven adaptation, resilience, uncertainty tolerance, and persistence. The final test is singular. If you could have any power, change any aspect of yourself, what would you choose? The temple will grant it. Daeho stared at the words for a long moment. Then he started laughing. It hurt to laugh, sent sharp pains through his chest, but he couldn't help it. After everything, after all the impossible trials, the final test was a wish? Outside, the galaxy's experts leaned forward. This was it. The final trial. What would the human choose? Immortality, the Nexus AI predicted. Humans fear death more than most species. He'll want to live forever. No, Velthra said from her medical bed. He'll choose strength. He's been too weak this entire time. He'll want the power to never be weak again. Knowledge, a Valdrine mystic suggested. He's been making decisions with incomplete information. He'll want to know everything. Dr. Mina said nothing. She was watching Daeho's face on the screen, trying to read his expression. Daeho sat in the chair and thought. The temple would grant anything. Perfect health, unlimited strength, the ability to never fail. He could become more than human, could transcend every limitation that had made this journey so painful. He thought about what he could do with real power. Save lives, protect Earth, make sure no one else had to suffer the way he'd suffered. He could make himself into something better, something that wouldn't break so easily. The interface waited patiently. Time didn't seem to matter here. Daeho thought about his sister Yunji. She died because of a cheap part and corporate greed. If he'd had power then, could he have saved her? If he had the strength to reshape the world, could he prevent anyone else from dying that way? He thought about his parents. They'd worked their whole lives in terrible conditions for minimal pay. If he had unlimited resources, he could give them the comfortable life they deserved. He could fix all the injustices he'd seen. The interface brightened as if sensing he was close to a decision. But then Daeho thought about the temple itself. About the first step that had knocked out 999 warriors. They'd all been powerful in their own ways. Stronger than him, faster than him, smarter than him, and they'd all failed. He thought about the gravity chamber, about crawling when he couldn't walk, about moving one finger at a time when he couldn't crawl. Power hadn't mattered there. Only the refusal to quit. He thought about the door puzzle, about making choices with incomplete information, about being okay with uncertainty. All the powerful AIs and telepaths in the galaxy had been paralyzed trying to find the perfect answer. He'd succeeded by accepting that perfect answers didn't exist. He thought about the combat chamber, about turning his weakness into strategy, about surviving when he couldn't win. The holograms had been perfect warriors. He'd beaten them by fighting imperfectly, by adapting, by cheating. Every trial had tested something other than power. Every challenge had required him to be exactly what he was. Human. Weak, uncertain, adaptable, stubborn. If he changed himself, if he became something else, would he still be able to pass those tests? Hours passed. The galaxy watched and waited. Experts speculated. The medical staff checked on Daiho's vital signs through the temple's scanners and reported that he was exhausted, injured, barely conscious. But he sat in that chair, thinking. Captain Hyejin stared at the screen. "Come on," she whispered. "Just choose something, anything, end this." But Daiho kept thinking. The temple had been built by the precursors, a species so advanced they'd disappeared from the galaxy. They'd created a test that lasted millions of years, that appeared on different worlds, that challenged warriors from every species. Why? What were they looking for? Not the strongest. Not the smartest. Not the most powerful. Those warriors had all fallen at the first step. The temple was looking for something else. Something that humans had because of their weakness, not despite it. Daiho looked at the interface, at the promise of anything he wanted. All the power in the galaxy offered freely, and he thought about what power had done to species throughout history. The strong conquered the weak. The smart manipulated the stupid. Power corrupted. Power destroyed. Power was what had killed the precursors, probably. They'd had everything, could do anything, and it had ended them. He made his choice. "I don't want power," Daiho said to the empty chamber. His voice was rough, painful. "I don't want to change. I want to go home." The interface flickered. Text appeared. "Clarify. You refuse the temple's gift?" "Yes," Daiho said. "I refuse." Outside, the galaxy erupted in chaos. The experts shouted over each other. How could he refuse? This was the reward, the whole point of the temple. Millions of beings watched a human throw away the chance of a lifetime. But Captain Hyejin was smiling through her tears. And Dr. Mina was nodding slowly. "He understands," she said. The chamber filled with light. Not harsh or blinding, but warm, like sunlight. The voice that had spoken when Daiho first stepped on the stone returned, speaking in every language at once. "Humanity is acknowledged. Of 1,000 warriors, only one understood. Power is not the prize. The test was never about what you could take. It was about what you would do when offered everything." The walls of the chamber dissolved, and Daiho could see the entire temple laid out like a map. Hundreds of chambers, thousands of trials, all of them designed to challenge different aspects of a species' character. And at the end, the same test for everyone. Unlimited power offered freely. "Every species that found the temple before failed here," the voice continued. "They conquered the trials through strength or speed or intelligence. And when offered power at the end, they took it. They became gods. And then they destroyed themselves because power without wisdom breeds destruction. Wisdom without humility breeds tyranny. The precursors learned this too late. Images appeared in the light. The precursors at their height, building wonders across the galaxy. Then the slow corruption, the wars, the arrogance, the eventual collapse of a civilization that had achieved everything and lost themselves in the process. "We built this temple as a warning and a safeguard," the voice said, "to find a species worthy of our legacy. Not the strongest, not the smartest, but one that understands that power is not the answer, one that values connection over dominance, one that remembers they are fragile." The light focused on Daiho, and suddenly his injuries were healing, not all at once but quickly. His ribs mended, his cuts sealed. The pain faded, not because the temple was giving him power, but because it was restoring what had been broken. "You passed because you are weak," the voice said. "And you know it. You accept it. You work with it. That is wisdom. That is what we lost." Daiho stood up from the chair. He felt better than he had in days, but he was still just human. Still fragile, still mortal. The temple hadn't made him into something more. It had just fixed what was broken. "The knowledge is yours," the voice said. "Not weapons. Not tools of domination. But the wisdom we should have valued. Sustainable technology. Medical advances. Methods to live in harmony rather than conquest. Take this to your species. Help them avoid our mistakes." The light intensified, and Daiho felt information flowing into his mind. Not overwhelming. Not destructive like what had knocked out the other warriors. Just knowledge, transferred carefully, at a pace he could handle. Designs for fusion plants that produce no waste. Medical techniques that could cure diseases that still plagued humanity. Agricultural methods for hostile environments. Engineering principles for building structures that would last millennia. All of it practical. All of it focused on survival rather than dominance. The tools a species needed to thrive without destroying themselves or others. When it ended, Daiho was standing alone in the chamber. The chair was gone. The interface was gone. There was just a simple door ahead, and through it he could see sunlight. He walked toward it. His legs were steady now. His breathing was normal. He was still Corporal Deho, still human, still nothing special by the galaxy's standards, but he was alive, and he'd learned things that might help his species survive a little longer. The door opened onto the desert of Carvenis. Deho stepped out into the red sand and twin sunlight. The temple was behind him, already beginning to fade. It had served its purpose. Ahead he could see the camp where 1,000 warriors had gathered, where Captain Heejin waited with medical teams and scientists and reporters from 100 worlds, where the galaxy watched to see what the human would do next. Deho walked toward them. He was limping slightly, still tired despite the healing, but he was walking, and behind him the Temple of Ascension dissolved into light and vanished, its test complete after 1,000,000 years. For the first time in history, someone had passed, not by being strong enough to take what was offered, but by being wise enough to refuse it. 6 months had passed since the temple vanished, and the galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened. Earth had become the center of attention overnight. Ships from every major species arrived daily, diplomats and scientists and curious citizens all wanting to meet humans, to understand them, to figure out what made them special. The Galactic Council had moved humanity's status from probationary member to full voting rights. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchanges were established. Humanity, the species that everyone had dismissed as weak and primitive, was suddenly important. Deho hated it. He'd been offered promotions, medals, speaking tours, book deals, everything the galaxy could think to give someone who'd done the impossible. He'd refused it all. He was still Corporal Deho. He'd requested assignment as an instructor at the military academy, training new soldiers. The same job he'd been doing before the temple. The request had been granted, though his superiors thought he was crazy for turning down fame and fortune. Captain Hyojin understood. She'd been promoted to major and given command of Earth's first deep space exploration ship. She'd requested Deho for her crew. He'd refused that too. You could see the galaxy, she'd said when he turned her down. New worlds, first contact situations, everything you trained for. I've seen enough, Deho had replied. Someone needs to teach the next group not to do stupid things like volunteer for ancient alien death traps. So he taught. Basic survival skills, emergency procedures, how to make decisions with incomplete information, how to keep going when logic said to quit. The students thought he was boring. He didn't tell war stories or brag about the temple. He just taught them how to stay alive. Today, he had a visitor. Commander Velthra of the Krillian Empire stood outside the Academy's main building, looking uncomfortable. She was too large for human architecture, and she had to duck to enter doorways. Students stared at her as she passed. Krillians were rare on Earth, and seeing one in person was still unusual. Deho met her in his small office. It had a desk, 2 chairs, and a window overlooking the training grounds. Nothing fancy. He'd refused the larger office they'd offered. Commander, Deho said, standing. This is unexpected. Velthra sat carefully in the chair across from him. It creaked under her weight but held. I had to come to Earth for a diplomatic meeting. I thought I should visit you. To apologize for calling humans weak? Deho asked with a slight smile. Yes, Velthra said simply. I was wrong. My entire species was wrong. We measured strength incorrectly. Deho shook his head. You weren't wrong. Humans are weak. By any physical measure, we're at the bottom of the galactic rankings. You could break me with one hand. Then why did you succeed? It was the question everyone asked. Deho had heard it 1,000 times in the past 6 months. Scientists had published papers on it. Philosophers debated it. The question had become the most discussed topic in galactic media. Because the temple wasn't testing strength, Deho said. It was testing something else. What? Deho looked out the window at the students running obstacle courses. Some were succeeding. Some were failing. But they all kept trying. It was testing if you remember what failure feels like. If you can make decisions when you're not sure. If you keep going when things are impossible. Your species is too successful. You evolved on easy worlds, conquered neighboring systems without much resistance. You're not used to losing. And humans are. We lose all the time, Deho said. It's basically our species' hobby. We tried to live in places we shouldn't. Built cities in deserts and tundra and swamps. We kept dying from diseases and accidents and our own stupidity, Half of human history is just a record of terrible decisions and barely surviving the consequences. Velthra was quiet for a moment. The temple downloaded something into us. The warriors who fell, we all experienced the same thing. Your species' history, every ice age, every extinction event, every plague and famine and war, we felt all of it at once and our minds couldn't handle the weight. I'm sorry, Deho said, don't be. It was educational. I understand now why humans are the way they are. You carry that weight all the time. Every human alive has ancestors who survived impossible things. It's in your genetics, your culture, your psychology. You're built to lose and keep trying anyway. That doesn't sound like a compliment. It is, Velthra said. The Krillian Empire has existed for 10,000 years. We've never faced a real threat. Our military trains for conflicts that never come. Our society is stable, prosperous, peaceful, and we've become weak in ways I didn't recognize until the temple showed me. We can't handle uncertainty. We can't adapt to rapid change. If a real crisis came, something that threatened our survival, I don't know if we could handle it. She stood, her armor scraping against the ceiling. The precursors understood this. They built the temple to find a species that could survive anything, not because they were strong, but because they'd learned how to be weak and still continue. That's you. After Velthra left, Daiho sat alone in his office and thought about the past 6 months, about the knowledge the temple had given him. The scientists on Earth were going through it all carefully, verifying everything before implementing anything. They'd already made breakthroughs in fusion power and medical technology. In 10 years, maybe 20, humanity would be decades ahead of where they should be. But Daiho worried about it. Power, even the power to help, could corrupt. The precursors had learned that lesson the hard way. His communicator beeped. A message from Dr. Mina, the Valdrine psychologist who'd figured out what the temple was testing. She'd become something like a friend over the past months, one of the few people who seemed to understand why Daiho had refused the temple's final gift. Thought you'd want to know, the message read. The Galactic Council is forming a new committee to study sustainable development. They're using the precursor knowledge you brought back as a template, multiple species working together to advance without the mistakes of the past. It's unprecedented, Daiho smiled. That was good. That was what the temple had wanted. Not one species using the knowledge to dominate others, but everyone learning from it together. Another message came through. Captain Hyejin, still sure you don't want to join my crew? We're launching next month. Could use someone who knows how to survive the impossible. Daiho typed back. I'm good. Teach the next generation. Someone has to. Hyejin replied. You're boring, you know that? Yeah, Daiho typed. I know. He closed the messages and looked out at the training grounds again. A student had just failed an obstacle course and was sitting on the ground looking defeated. Daiho watched to see what the student would do. Give up? Ask for help? Complain about the difficulty? The student stood up and tried again. Daiho nodded. That was human. That was what would keep the species alive. Not strength or power or advanced technology. Just the simple refusal to stay down. That evening, Daiho visited his parents. They lived in a small apartment in the Seoul district. Nothing fancy, but it had real windows and recycled air that didn't smell like metal. They'd retired from the mines after Daiho had sent them enough money over the years. His mother had started a garden. His father was learning to paint. They didn't talk about the temple much. They'd watched it happen on the news, had cried when they thought he would die, had celebrated when he came out alive. But they didn't make a big deal about it. That wasn't the family way. Velthra visited today, Daiho mentioned over dinner. His mother had made kimchi stew, real vegetables grown in earth soil, not the synthetic stuff from the stations. The big alien? His father asked. The one who said humans were weak? That's the one. She came to apologize, his mother nodded. Good, she should apologize. You almost died. I did die technically, for about 30 seconds in the gravity chamber. My heart stopped. Don't joke about that, his mother said, but she was smiling. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Finally, his father asked the question he'd been avoiding for 6 months. Do you regret it? Refusing the power? Daiho thought about it. He could have been immortal, invincible, godlike. He could have reshaped reality itself. And he'd said no. No, he said. I don't regret it. Power like that would have changed me, made me something other than human. And being human is kind of the point, isn't it? His father smiled. Your sister would be proud. She always said you were too stubborn for your own good. I learned from the best, Deho said. After dinner, he walked through the Seoul district, looking at the city that had been rebuilt a dozen times over the centuries. War, natural disaster, environmental collapse. Humanity had survived all of it through sheer determination. The buildings weren't the tallest or the fanciest. The technology wasn't the most advanced. But the city worked and the people were alive, and that was enough. Across the galaxy, other species were learning similar lessons. The Krillians had started training their soldiers in uncertainty tolerance. The Valdrine were studying human decision-making patterns. The academic consortium had established exchange programs where alien students lived with human families to learn how they approached problems. Humanity wasn't leading this change. They were just being themselves. And other species were learning by watching. It was probably better that way. Humans weren't ready to lead the galaxy. They were barely ready to manage their own planet. But they could offer something valuable: the memory of struggle, the knowledge of survival, the understanding that being weak and being defeated were different things. 3 months later, Deho was teaching a class on survival psychology when an alarm sounded. Everyone's communicators lit up with emergency messages. A star in a nearby system had gone unstable. The Korthan colony world there had hours before the star exploded. Not enough time to evacuate everyone. The galaxy's response was immediate. Every species sent ships, but it was a human engineer, using the knowledge from the temple, who designed a shield system that could protect the planet long enough for evacuation. And it was human volunteers trained in impossible conditions who stayed on the planet until the last Korthan civilian was safe. Deho watched the news coverage from Earth. The humans who'd volunteered weren't special. They were just ordinary people who saw someone needed help and decided to help. No thought of glory or reward. Just the simple human response to suffering: try to stop it. When the last ship left the Korthan world, the star exploded. The shield held just long enough. The humans made it out with minutes to spare. Commander Velthra sent Deho a message that night. Your species keeps surprising us. We're the warriors. We should have been the ones to stay behind. Deho replied, You would have. But you thought about it logically, calculated the risk, tried to find a better solution. We just went. Sometimes that's what the situation needs. Is that what the temple taught you? No, that's what being human taught me. The temple just recognized it. A year after the temple vanished, the Galactic Council held a memorial service for the precursors. Every species sent representatives. It was held on Carvenus, where the temple had appeared, though the structure itself was long gone. Deho attended because they asked him to speak. He'd prepared nothing. He just stood in front of the assembled representatives of 100 species and said what he felt. The precursors had everything: power, knowledge, technology we still can't understand. And it destroyed them. They built the temple to warn us, to find someone who understood that power isn't the answer. I got lucky. I was from a species that never had power, so I didn't want it. But the lesson is for everyone. Strength is good. Knowledge is good. Advancement is good. But only if you remember what it's like to be weak, to be uncertain, to fail. The moment you forget that, you start down the path the precursors walked. And we all know where that path ends. He paused, looking at the faces of species from across the galaxy. Some had 3 eyes. Some had scales. Some didn't have faces at all. But they were all listening. Humanity isn't special. We're not smarter or stronger or better. We're just stubborn. And we remember our failures. That's all. Any species can learn that. Any species can choose humility over power. That's the real gift the precursors left. Not technology or knowledge, but a warning. Don't be like us. Stay humble. Stay connected. Remember you're fragile. The memorial ended quietly. No speeches from politicians. No grand ceremonies. Just a moment of silence for a species that had achieved everything and lost themselves in the process. Deho returned to Earth and to his teaching. The students still thought he was boring. He still refused promotions. Life continued. But across the galaxy, something was changing. Species that had been rivals for millennia started cooperating. Technology sharing became common. The focus shifted from military might to sustainable development. It happened slowly over years, but it happened. And historians would later mark the temple's appearance as the turning point. Not because it gave humanity advanced knowledge. Not because it proved humans were special. but because it taught the galaxy a lesson they'd forgotten, that wisdom comes from accepting your own weakness, and strength means knowing when not to use power. Tejo never became famous. He never wanted to be. He lived a quiet life, taught students who mostly forgot his name, and died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 87. Just an ordinary human who'd done an extraordinary thing and then returned to ordinary life. But on the memorial stone they placed at the academy where he'd taught, they carved simple words in 100 languages. He took one more step. And across the galaxy, that phrase became shorthand for the human philosophy. When things are impossible, when logic says to quit, when you're too weak to continue, you take one more step, because that's what survivors do. That's what the temple recognized. That's what the precursors wished they'd remembered. The galaxy had tested 1,000 warriors. Only the human passed, not because he was strong, but because he understood that being weak and keeping going anyway was its own kind of strength. The kind that lasts, the kind that survives, the kind that builds civilizations that remember they're fragile and treats that fragility as wisdom rather than weakness. And in the end, that was the most human answer of all.